Hello, welcome to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. This is Undercrag City. In the last episode, I built the first piece of the Overcrag, the Manor House. A somewhat stark and imposing building, this is currently sitting all alone at the top of the cliff. So in this episode, I'm going to start working on the grounds around the Manor House, starting with some stables, and I'm going to blend it all in to the rest of the model. Let's start with PVA glue and DAS clay. I'm being fairly generous with both here, covering the clay with plenty of glue and using the brush to shape it into a rock formation. I've hacked some foam into some stone shapes. I'm blending those in as well, just to give some more texture. When all that's dry, patches of glue sprinkled with sand that will become my mosses later on. Let's leave that to dry and move on to the stables. I've decided that the buildings of the Overcrag should be architecturally quite different to those of Undercrag City. Up on the top of the mountain, it's very windy and quite cold. Also, I really liked the eaves of the manor house that I came up with in the last episode, the way they protrude at an angle. So I've decided that although the manor house is new, it should be reflected in the older buildings around it, as if they influenced it in the first place. The other theme that I think I'll carry through the Overcrag is that the buildings are covered with turf or built into hillsides. This is a reflection of the cave culture that came up from Undercrag City to the Overcrag. Here you can see I'm piecing together the front wall of the stables. I've got a card backing, and then I've built over this with 5mm foam core. With the paper stripped off, I'm drawing stonework with a pencil. The rest of the structure is very quick and simple. A matching rear wall, some card spacers, and then start to build the roofs. I've left sections cut out where I think this is going to overlap another part of the model. As it happens, I'll change this later. With my basic structure completed, I'm going to add some balsa wood details. There'll be hints of Undercrag City about these buildings, but here I'm going for a combination of timber and stone rather than timber and plaster. I'm starting with characteristic two-part stable doors, just so that it's clear what this building is. Now 2mm wide strips of thin balsa wood. I want the eaves to be a timber frame structure as well, so I've hand drawn some planks into this sheet of balsa, and I've cut a wedge to fit. Some of the little bits need some coaxing. And then more timber framing. Of course, it's also important to do things in the right order. I should have built inside the door frame first. So I'll fix that now. It's worth mentioning that I cut my doorways wider than I wanted them to be. I knew I was going to insert these frames on both sides. reducing the width. With the interior frames in place, I can put on the exteriors. Now I'm lining the front with matchsticks for some extra bulk, just like when I kept adding extra stonework to the manor house. All these little details take quite a small piece of cardboard and make it into something much bigger. Three simple small rectangles add more character. And then on top of those, I'm going to add more matchsticks and leave them protruding over the front of the buildings. Time for some painting. I'm doing all my stonework in the usual dark grey. I'm not too worried about getting it on the timber at this point. I'll pick that out later. While that's drying, let's work on the yard. I've stripped all the paper off my foam core, and I'm drawing in my stonework, as usual, with a pencil. And then the same dark grey. Just daubing it in, trying not to leave too much black. While we're doing that, let's work on the cliff face as well. It's important that the Overcrag, although architecturally different, blends in with Undercrag City. These are the same people, although they've migrated upwards over a period of many years. Back to the stables. The dark grey is dry, so all of the timber is getting a light grey undercoat. This will be exactly the same as all of the timber in Undercrag City. This is important. Again, I want to keep some themes consistent throughout both parts of the model, so it doesn't feel like I've just glued two completely different models together. Dry brushing the same light grey over all of the stonework. And then the mountainside itself. You can also see, as usual, I have gone over the edges of work I finished before. This is how everything keeps blending together and appears seamless. The light grey dry brushing is followed with some white. And the same for the yard. I haven't done the whole area because I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. The Overcrag could develop in a great many different ways. Adding an extra row of steps to the front there. And now adding clay to blend the manor house into its surroundings. I want to soften the appearance of the yard and the house by having earth and plants. It's very grey and stark at the moment. Back to the stables again. I'm covering all of the grey timber with brown ink. I've mentioned before that it's very useful to have two things on the go at once, working between one and the other, which cuts down on drying times, twiddling your thumbs in between. When the brown ink is dry, I'm going to dry brush it with pale yellow. I'm being careful not to get too much of this onto the grey stone. You can also see it's helped to hide some of the glue splodges that had appeared in the ink. That was a bit heavy. Catching all of the edges. And now white, which I can allow to go over the stone. And when that's dry, the brown ink again. And we start to see that lovely rich timber colour that's characteristic throughout the city. One last touch, the hinges on the doors. Strips of thin black card. I did the first door and decided they were a bit too long. So off they come. Let's try again. That's better. A little touch of silver paint on each one, not too much. A little bit of rust ink to take the shine off. And I'm going to glue that in. If you've been watching closely, you'll notice I forgot to add the black ink to the stonework. It's not the end of the world, but it makes life a little more difficult later on. And here we go with my turf roofs. I'm just hoping this is going to look good. I like the idea of it for the whole of the Overcrag. But we'll see. You can see that the stables and the manor house mirror each other. 3 sharp peaks with overhanging eaves. I'm completely covering my clay with PVA glue and some patches in between the doors and around the fronts. And this gets a good coating of sand. When that's dry, brown paint. The same brown I've used for the earth elsewhere in the model. This whole project has used quite a small palette of colours. Now a lighter tone, generously dry brushed over the whole roof and the grounds around the manor house. And some touches on the front of the cliff. That's followed by the same pale yellow I used on the woodwork. And now it's time for ink washes, being very careful not to drip bits on Undercrag City. First, a thin black over all of the stone. And touches of green where my mosses go. Wash that out with yellow. And then a thin brown wash on my earth. I'm allowing each colour to run into the next to some extent. And here's where I realised I hadn't put black ink on the building. A little bit fiddly. And all of the stonework. And the brown ink on my roofs. As usual, the black looks very dark, but it will fade as it dries. Once that's all dry, it's time for some greenery. Daubing PVA on and adding some flowers. And then I'll cover everything with a sprinkling of static grass. I'm not using an applicator, I'm just piling it on. If you're enjoying this project, and you haven't already, please do remember to subscribe to the channel, and like and share, and feel free to leave comments and questions. I answer every single one. I really enjoy hearing from you, and thank you for your support. And now it's time to add grass to the stables. Gonna put some large clumps on first, just to add a bit of interest. And then heap on the static grass. Let that dry, remove the surplus, and hey presto. Undercrag Manor stables. There's a long way to go with the Undercrag. I'll be adding a lot more buildings, but I do like this theme so far. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.